and Lyndon Johnson, as part of the history, listened to them, and they were able to make recommendations for the Civil Rights Act of '64 and for the Voting Rights Act after the protests and the marches and all the rest of it. Now, after the laws were passed, the question was, what is the commission going to do now? And should it go out of existence? Well, no. The Congress said, your job now is to monitor to make sure the laws are enforced. It's one thing to pass laws, but you got to tell people that they're supposed to enforce them. And all they did then from then on was have fights with presidents and justice departments because they weren't enforcing the law. And every time they would write a report saying you're not enforcing it enough, they would get mad at them and go public and attack the commissioners. Nixon was the main one who did that. Tricky Dick, who thought he was real tricky, kept on behind the scenes trying to do something to the commission. But basically, all that time, and the commission also turned its attention to issues involving sex discrimination. Congress added that to the law, and discrimination based on age. And as I say, they did the hearings that led to the Age Discrimination Act and some of the provisions on sex discrimination in the law. Things rocked along, and the commission, they did a big study on police community issues during the Carter administration. They went all around the country to places. These were new commissioners, other people who were added, who you can read about in the book. And they went around looking at these incidents where police had shot people who were unarmed. We heard about that. It still happens, obviously. And they wrote a report on how the police ought to stop doing that, called Who's Guarding the Guardians, and some guidelines for the police to use. Well, Reagan got elected, and Ed Meese and Reagan got together. Meese was his counselor and then Attorney General. And Reagan said, my coalition, conservative coalition, doesn't like all this civil rights stuff. We need to turn back the clock. And what do they mean writing this report about police? And Meese loved police. He used to listen to police on his radio band at night, listen to all the police reports. And he got mad when he saw this report that they had done. They also did a report on affirmative action supporting it. And the administration had planned to get rid of affirmative action. So they said, who are these people on the commission? By that time, I was on the commission. I was appointed in 1980 by Carter before he left office. I had run education programs for him before. So at this point, the book is based not just on all the papers in the files, although I continue to amass information from all of the files and oral histories and everything else, but in addition, it's what I know about what happened from the perspective that I have, which has been verified by the documents that I saw. And Reagan said, one of the ringleaders over there is Mary Berry. This place over there, she's a ringleader. And she told a black reporter who asked him why was he after us, he said, told him that I served at his pleasure and I wasn't giving him any pleasure. That's what he told the reporter. We were a pocket of renegades that needed to be cleaned out because we kept on criticizing and doing stuff, and he wanted to replace us with people who would stand up and cheerlead every time he did something and say, isn't that great? The other strategy he had, and I just wrote a piece the other day about how Reagan and the Republicans paved the way for Obama. So I'll explain that to you. They decided that they needed some black conservatives who would be the mouthpieces and the fronts for what they were doing. This is all in the book. It is documented. And so they had this meeting, and they invited these black people and key ones, and they said, if you do the right thing, we're going to let you be in our administration. You can get a job doing this. Clarence Thomas. You heard of him? A guy named Sam Pierce, who was the head of the Housing of Urban HUD. These people. And they said, you're going to be our folks. Okay? Clarence Pendleton, who was an Urban League director from San Diego, who was the only Urban League local director to support Reagan in the '80 election. And once they got in office, they appointed these people. They did what they said they were going to do. And Pendleton especially, they said now, they called him in and they said, now we want you to interpret for us, to the community, that what we do on civil rights is the right thing. That's your job. You go tell all the black folks, by then we were black folks, all the civil rights folks, that what we're doing as we turn back the clock is great for them. That's your job. And they got one of the guys in the White House to write his speeches for him, with the right themes that he was supposed to use when he went out and made these speeches. And so they appointed him to be chair of the Civil Rights Commission, the first black chair. And there were black people across the country said, isn't that great? We got a black person to be the chair of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission for the first time. And then he went around making these speeches. He called civil rights leaders that they were as bad for the black people as Jim Jones, because they were making them drink Kool-Aid and be Democrats instead of supporting the Republicans like they're supposed to. And he told black audiences all over the country that what y'all ought to do is be in favor of getting rid of the minimum wage and getting rid of occupational licensing and getting tax cuts for the rich so they can create jobs for you. And then you should be applauding Ronald Reagan. That would be the speech. That's the speech they gave him. That's what he went all around the country telling people this. And every time Reagan would do something to cut back on something, he would say, now that's the best thing the president couldn't have done. Don't you agree? He said. And that was his job. Well, the rest of us who were still on the commission said, that's not the job of the Civil Rights Commission. It's not supposed to be giving applause to some bad stuff that some president is doing. He's supposed to take on the president. So Reagan decided to fire us, get rid of us, since he couldn't get us to leave. And so he fired commissioners. And then when he fired me, he ran into a little buzzsaw. Because I was thinking he was going to do it. And then I thought, no, that violates the independence of the commission. The commission's supposed to be independent of the White House. You serve part-time, you volunteer. I've always been a professor. I mean, that's not my main job, being on the commission. And everybody was part-time. And we're trying to do the right thing. And it's okay if he wants to ask us if we'd like to leave so he can put somebody else on. But not to say he's firing us because he doesn't like what we're saying. That just violates everything the commission stands for. So one of the women on there, Ramirez, and I sued him. And we sued him in federal district court. And they went around telling everybody, they can't win. There's no way they can beat the president. And I have to admit, my students in my class told me I couldn't beat the president. What do you mean suing the president? You can't sue the president. And so we didn't, I was my own lawyer. We had the NACP Legal Defense Fund and the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund. And the court decided in our favor. The court said that the commission was independent, and you don't fire us because of our criticisms. And the way the judge put it was, she said, you don't get rid of a watchdog for biting. That's what watchdogs do, they bite you. And so the White House was all upset. They had already named who they were going to replace us with, and all these people, and they were going to get them confirmed by the Senate, and it didn't happen. So the Republicans controlled one house of the Congress at that time. So what they did is they had what you do in Washington all the time, the grand compromise. They always compromise. And so they decided to pass a new law, which really gutted the commission, and that it would be 8 people instead of 6, and that the Congress would appoint half, and the White House would appoint half, and there wouldn't be any Senate confirmation, and everybody could put on there whoever they felt like putting on there. As someone said to me, that you could appoint an axe murderer and nobody would know because nobody even vetted them or checked them or anything. And then old Reagan promised to get that law passed because we had beaten him in court, that he would appoint 2 women who were on there already, Joe Ruckelshaus and Mary Louise Smith, who were good feminists, women's rights people, good Republicans, and that he would reappoint them. So that it would be balanced. Well, after he got the agreement, Pendleton went in to see him and said, Mr. President, I'm upset because this agreement is going to give us, we're going to lose control. And Reagan told him, nah, don't worry about it. Those people on the Hill, the boys, they're playing with me, but don't worry about it. I'm going to succor them. And that's exactly what he did. After they made the agreement and signed the bill, he said, I'm not appointing those 2 women. I'm going to appoint 2 other people. And then they got 2 other people who they asked before they got them, are you going to support the president's, whatever the president does? And they said yes, and they put them on there. And then they had control of the commission. From that time on, the commission became less than it was supposed to be in trying to stand up for the rights of people. And then it was not until after that when Clinton came in. I stayed on all those years as a dissenting voice, writing dissents and attacking people. But when Clinton came on, Clinton decided to designate me as chair. He thought it would be kind of funny after Reagan had fired me and all that. But